Eleanor Davis wiped the grease from her hands as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her small repair garage. The shop sat at the edge of Colony 7, a lonely settlement on the outer rim of human space. The building was old, made of corroded metal and weathered wood, but it was hers. She had worked here for 5 years, fixing broken shuttles and damaged equipment for whoever came through the colony gates. The alarm on her workshop door chimed. Eleanor looked up from the engine she had been examining. A ship was coming down fast from the sky. She could hear the screaming sound of its engines cutting through the atmosphere. Something was wrong. The vessel was not landing smoothly. It was falling, spiraling down with smoke trailing behind it like a wounded bird. Eleanor ran outside, shielding her eyes from the bright sunlight. The ship descended rapidly, its hull glowing red from the friction of the air. Sparks flew from damaged systems. The pilot was struggling to control it. Eleanor held her breath as the spacecraft crashed down into the desert sand just 300 meters from her garage. The impact created a massive cloud of dust that rolled across the landscape like a wave. For a moment there was only silence. Eleanor waited, watching the dust settle slowly. Then the cockpit door hissed open. A figure emerged, tall and unusual. The being had skin that looked like clear crystal, and inside the crystal, lights glowed in patterns of blue and purple. This was an alien. Eleanor had seen a few aliens before in her life, but they were rare in this remote corner of space. The alien walked toward her, moving with a careful grace despite the obvious damage to his ship. He wore a long coat that seemed to shimmer with its own light. When he spoke, his voice came through a small device on his chest, translating his words into human language. "I am Oliver," he said. "My ship has suffered critical damage. I require immediate repairs. I can offer you payment. My credit rating is acceptable." Eleanor approached the damaged vessel, her eyes studying every detail. She could see the problems immediately. The quantum stabilizer was completely destroyed, burned black and twisted. The navigation systems had melted into useless metal. The hull had long cracks running along the side like lightning marks. The damage was severe. "This is bad," Eleanor said quietly, walking around the ship. "Really bad." Oliver followed her, his crystal skin flickering with different colors. In his culture, the Vexian people valued efficiency and profit above all things. Everything had a cost. Everything had a negotiation. He expected Eleanor to give him a massive bill, to take advantage of his situation. "How much will you charge?" Oliver asked, his voice tight with worry. Eleanor climbed up into the cockpit and examined the systems more carefully. Her mind was already working through the problem like a puzzle. She could see what was broken, yes, but she could also see the solutions. Some of the components could be salvaged and repurposed. Other pieces could be replaced with human technology in creative ways. The more she looked, the more she realized this was an incredible challenge, exactly the kind of work that made her heart race. She climbed back down and looked at Oliver directly. "I'll fix it for free," she said simply. Oliver's bioluminescent skin dimmed to almost nothing. In all his years of traveling through the galaxy, meeting countless species and civilizations, he had never heard such words. In Vexian society nothing was free. Everything had a price, a cost, a hidden transaction buried somewhere in the fine print. Every interaction was calculated for profit. The idea of doing something without expecting payment was completely foreign to him. "Why would you do this?" Oliver asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "What is your advantage? What do you gain?" Eleanor smiled. "I love solving problems. Your ship is one hell of a puzzle and I want to solve it. That's enough for me." Oliver stood silent for a long moment. His crystal skin began to glow again, cycling through soft colors as he processed what this human woman had just said. In his entire life he had never met anyone like her. Her words made no sense to him, yet somehow he believed her. "If you are certain," Oliver said slowly, "then I accept your kindness." Eleanor nodded and got to work immediately. She worked through the evening, removing damaged components and cataloging what could be saved. She worked through the night, her hands moving with practiced skill and precision. When morning came, she was still working, drinking coffee and making notes about what she would need to repair next. Days passed. Eleanor worked every night after the colony settled down. She removed the destroyed quantum stabilizer and began rebuilding it from scratch, using components from an old human vessel that had crashed in the desert years ago. She rewired the navigation systems with human technology, creating connections that should not have worked according to Vexian engineering, but they did. She reinforced the hull cracks with a special adhesive compound and sealed them with precision. Oliver stayed in the colony those 2 weeks watching Eleanor work. He learned things about human culture that fascinated him. He saw that Eleanor did not work for profit alone. She worked because she loved the work itself. She took pride in her creations. She helped people without expecting anything in return. These were concepts that Vexian society had nearly forgotten. By the end of the second week, Eleanor had not just repaired Oliver's ship. She had improved it. The quantum stabilizer was now more efficient than the original design. The navigation systems were faster and more reliable. The hull was stronger than before. On the day Oliver was ready to leave, he tried once more to pay Eleanor. He offered her thousands of credits, enough to rebuild her entire garage. Eleanor refused again, shaking her head with a smile. "Just go," Eleanor said. "Travel safely. And if you meet other humans out there in the galaxy, remember us kindly. Remember what you learned here." Oliver's skin glowed bright with colors Eleanor had not seen before. He placed his hand on his chest, and what she learned was a sign of deep respect in his culture. Then he boarded his ship, and it lifted off into the sky, heading back toward Vexian space. Eleanor watched him go, wondering if she would ever see him again. Eleanor returned to her regular work after Oliver left, fixing smaller ships and equipment for the colonists. The days settled back into a comfortable routine. She woke early, drank her morning coffee, and spent her time repairing whatever broken machinery arrived at her garage door. Life on Colony 7 was quiet and predictable. She did not think much about the Vexian trader who had come and gone. 3 weeks had passed when Eleanor received a message on her communication system. It came from across the vast distance of space, traveling through relay stations and satellite networks. The message was from Oliver. His voice came through clear and calm, speaking words that would change everything. "Eleanor, I have reached Vexian space safely. Your repairs were not merely functional. They were brilliant. You did not simply fix my ship. You improved it. The quantum stabilizer you rebuilt operates at 115% efficiency above the original design. The navigation systems you created function faster and more accurately than anything our engineers have produced in the last 50 years. I do not understand how you achieved this. I do not understand your methods. But I understand that you possess something rare. Something my people have forgotten." The message continued as Eleanor listened intently in her garage. Oliver explained how he had presented her work to the highest councils of Vexian society. He described how their best engineers had examined the modifications she had made. They were confused at first. The solutions seemed illogical according to Vexian principles. The materials should not have worked together. The connection should have failed. Yet they functioned perfectly. "Your kind thinks differently than us," Oliver's message explained. "You do not follow rigid rules. You see problems and you find creative answers. You combine old and new in ways that our education never teaches us. Most importantly, Eleanor, you did this work with no expectation of reward. This concept fascinates our scientists and philosophers. You have shown us something we had nearly lost. The value of work done for its own sake. The power of helping others without calculation of profit." Eleanor played the message 3 times, trying to process everything Oliver was saying. She had simply been doing what came naturally to her. She loved engineering. She loved solving problems. The idea that this might be special or unusual had never occurred to her. In her mind, she was just being human. She was being kind because kindness seemed like the right choice. Over the following weeks, Eleanor received more messages from Oliver. He sent her technical documents from Vexian universities. He sent her research papers about human innovation and creativity. He explained that Vexian society had become very efficient and very organized, but in becoming efficient they had lost something important. They had lost the ability to think in new ways. Their entire civilization followed the same patterns, the same rules, the same logic that had been established thousands of years ago. "Humans are young in the galaxy," Oliver wrote in one message. "Your species has only recently joined the larger community of spacefaring civilizations. Most of the older species view humans as primitive. They see you as less advanced, less intelligent, less capable. But this is wrong, Eleanor. I have seen your work. I have felt the quality of your mind. Humans do not think like machines. You think like artists. You combine intuition with logic. You take risks that seem foolish until they succeed." Eleanor found herself thinking about these messages throughout her day. She thought about them while she worked on engines and navigation systems. She thought about what Oliver was telling her about her own species. Was it true that humans had something valuable? Something different? She had always seen herself as just an ordinary mechanic in an ordinary colony on the edge of space. Then came the most important message. Oliver told her that he had proposed something revolutionary to the highest leaders of the Vexian Empire. He had suggested that humanity should not be treated as primitive trading partners or minor species to be managed. He had argued that humans possessed unique capabilities that could strengthen all of Vexian society. He had presented Eleanor's work as evidence. The leaders are divided, Oliver explained in his message. Some agree with my assessment. Others are skeptical. They say that one human and one ship are not enough evidence to warrant such a dramatic change in policy. But Admiral Richard, the most powerful military leader in the Vexian Empire, has become interested in your work. He wishes to meet you, Eleanor. He wishes to see for himself what a human mind can accomplish. This is a great opportunity but also a great risk. If you impress Admiral Richard, doors will open for your entire species. If you fail, humanity may be relegated to the margins of galactic society for centuries. Eleanor sat in her garage, staring at the message display. This was overwhelming. She was just a mechanic who liked to fix broken things. She was not a diplomat or a representative of her species. She was not a scientist or a politician. She was simply Eleanor Davis, a woman who worked with her hands and enjoyed solving problems. But then she thought about what Oliver had told her. She thought about the Vexian children who might grow up learning new ways of thinking. She thought about the possibilities that could come from human creativity combined with Vexian technology. She thought about the opportunity to show the galaxy what humans could do. Eleanor recorded a response message and sent it across the vast distance of space. She told Oliver that she would meet Admiral Richard. She told him that she would do her best to represent her people well. She told him that she was frightened, but she was also ready. She had no idea what awaited her. She had no way of knowing that the decision she had made to repair Oliver's ship for free was about to change not just her life, but the destiny of the entire human race. Eleanor closed her communication system and looked around her small garage. In a few weeks, everything would be different. But for now she had work to do. She had ships to repair and problems to solve. She picked up her tools and got back to work. Eleanor stood in her garage, running her hands over the tools on her workbench. She had been waiting for weeks, ever since Oliver's final message. The message had said that Admiral Richard would arrive soon. Eleanor did not know exactly when. She did not know what to expect. She only knew that everything was about to change. The morning started like any other morning on Colony 7. The sun rose over the desert, casting long shadows across the settlement. Eleanor made her coffee and opened her garage doors. A few colonists were already moving through the streets, starting their daily work. The colony was a peaceful place, small and quiet, far removed from the great powers and conflicts of the larger galaxy. Then, around midday, Eleanor heard something that made her stop working. It was a sound unlike anything she had ever heard before. It was not the sound of a single ship landing. It was the sound of many ships. Many large ships. The noise grew louder and louder, until it seemed to fill the entire sky. Eleanor rushed outside and looked up. Her breath caught in her throat. The sky was filled with massive vessels. They descended slowly, moving with perfect precision and coordination. The largest ship was in the center, a true galactic cruiser of tremendous size. It was longer than 10 city blocks and wider than the entire colony settlement. Its hull was covered in the shimmering purple light of Vexian technology. Around it flew smaller support vessels, each one larger than any ship Eleanor had ever seen before. People emerged from their homes and workplaces throughout the colony, staring upward in shock and fear. This was an invasion force. This had to be an invasion. Nothing else made sense. The colony had no weapons. They had no way to defend themselves against such power. Eleanor's heart raced. She thought of Oliver's messages. She thought of what he had promised. But looking at this massive display of military power, she wondered if she had been foolish to trust him. Maybe this was not what Oliver had described. Maybe something had gone wrong. The largest cruiser descended directly toward the colony center. Eleanor watched as it slowly lowered itself down, its massive landing gear extending beneath it. The ship was so huge that its shadow covered the entire settlement, plunging everything into darkness at midday. Wind from the ship's descent created a dust storm that swirled through the streets of the colony. Eleanor shielded her face from the dust and wind. Around her, colonists were running in different directions, some toward their homes, some toward the colony's small government building. She stood still, watching as the cruiser settled onto the ground with a heavy, deep sound that Eleanor could feel vibrating through her bones. For several minutes nothing happened. The dust continued to swirl. Eleanor waited, her heart pounding in her chest. Then a section of the cruiser's hull began to open. A massive ramp descended from the opening, metal grinding against metal as it lowered. Light spilled out from inside the ship, bright and white and cold. Figures began to emerge from inside the cruiser. They were tall and crystalline like Oliver, but their skin seemed even brighter and more intensely colored. These were clearly high-ranking Vexians. They wore clothing that sparkled with advanced technology. Their movements were precise and controlled, everything about them radiating power and authority. Oliver appeared among them, his crystal skin glowing with familiar blues and purples. When he saw Eleanor standing alone in the dust, he moved toward her. Behind him came another Vexian, taller than the others, with skin that shone brilliant gold and silver. This figure moved with an air of absolute command. Eleanor knew immediately that this was Admiral Richard. The colonists of Colony 7 watched in fear as the Vexians approached Eleanor's garage. Some colonists had gathered at a distance, wondering what was happening. Eleanor could see the fear in their faces. She could see them preparing for the worst. Admiral Richard stopped a few meters from Eleanor. He was even more impressive up close. His crystalline form seemed to contain entire galaxies of light within it. His eyes were ancient and powerful, eyes that had seen centuries of Vexian history and countless other civilizations rise and fall. "You are Eleanor Davis," Admiral Richard said, his voice deep and resonant, coming through his translation device. It was not a question. He already knew who she was. "I am," Eleanor replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have traveled a great distance to meet you," Admiral Richard continued. "Oliver has told me remarkable things about your work. He has shown me the specifications of your modifications to his vessel. Our finest engineers have examined what you created. They are confused and impressed in equal measure. They cannot fully understand your methods, yet the results are undeniable." Eleanor nodded slowly, unsure what to say. Around them, the dust was beginning to settle. More colonists had emerged from their homes, drawn by curiosity and fear in equal measure. "Your arrival has frightened my people," Eleanor said carefully. "They believe this is an invasion. They believe something terrible is about to happen." Admiral Richard turned and looked at the colonists watching from a distance. Then he turned back to Eleanor. "Fear is natural when facing the unknown. But I have not come to harm your colony or your people. I have come because Oliver believes your species possesses something valuable. Something that my civilization has lost. He believes that humans think differently than we do. He believes this difference could strengthen the Vexian Empire and benefit all species in the galaxy." "I don't understand," Eleanor said. "Why does this matter so much? I'm just a mechanic. I just fix broken things." Admiral Richard's golden skin seemed to glow brighter. "That is precisely why it matters," he said. "You fix broken things because you see the value in them. You fix them not for profit but because the work itself has meaning to you. This is not how my people think. We have forgotten how to think this way. And if we do not remember, my civilization will eventually fail, no matter how powerful we become." He paused, and Eleanor could see something almost like sadness in his ancient eyes. "I have a challenge for you, Eleanor Davis," Admiral Richard said. "A test that will determine the future of your entire species' relationship with the Vexian Empire. Will you accept?" Eleanor took a deep breath. She thought of Oliver's faith in her. She thought of what this could mean for humanity. "I will," she said. Admiral Richard gestured for Eleanor to follow him. She walked alongside the tall Vexian leader as he moved back toward the massive cruiser. Oliver walked behind them, his crystal skin flickering with colors that seemed to express both hope and worry. The dust had finally settled, and Eleanor could see the full scale of the Vexian military presence surrounding the colony. They climbed the metal ramp and entered the interior of the galactic cruiser. Eleanor's eyes widened at the sight before her. The inside of the ship was vast, filled with technology beyond anything she had ever imagined. Screens covered the walls, displaying information in languages she could not read. Vexian engineers worked at different stations, their movements synchronized and precise. The air itself seemed to hum with power. Admiral Richard led Eleanor through the corridors to a large chamber deep inside the ship. In the center of this chamber was the most complex piece of machinery Eleanor had ever seen. It was the quantum drive system, the engine that powered faster than light travel. The device was enormous, taking up most of the space in the chamber. Tubes and cables connected different sections. Crystals glowed within transparent chambers. Everything about it radiated both advanced technology and profound problems. "This is our greatest challenge," Admiral Richard said, stopping before the machine. "This is the quantum drive that powers all Vexian vessels. For 3,000 years we have used this design. For 3,000 years, it has served us well. But 500 years ago, we discovered a fundamental flaw in the system. We have tried everything. Our greatest engineers, our most advanced computers, our most brilliant minds have all attempted to solve this problem. None have succeeded. Eleanor approached the machine slowly, her eyes scanning every detail. She could see the problem almost immediately. There was a resonance issue in the crystal alignment. The quantum particles were not flowing smoothly through the system. They were creating friction, which generated heat and reduced efficiency. It was a problem that made the drive work, but never at full capacity. It was like trying to run while carrying a heavy weight. "What is the flaw?" Eleanor asked. Admiral Richard gestured to one of his engineers, a Vexian named David who approached carrying a digital display. David showed Eleanor diagrams of the drive system, along with countless failed attempts to repair it. Eleanor studied the information carefully, her mind working through the problem piece by piece. "The issue is fundamental to our engineering philosophy," Admiral Richard explained. "We have always believed that precision and perfection are the highest values. We design systems that must work exactly as specified, with no deviation, no improvisation, no flexibility. But this quantum drive requires something different. It requires a component that can adapt. It requires flexibility. It requires something that our rigid designs cannot provide." Eleanor moved closer to the machine, reaching out to touch some of the components. She could feel the vibrations running through the system. She could almost sense the problem, as if the machine itself was speaking to her, telling her what was wrong. "May I ask questions?" Eleanor said. "Of course," Admiral Richard replied. For the next several hours, Eleanor asked detailed questions about how the drive worked, how it had been designed, what materials were available on Vexian ships, and what kinds of experiments had already been attempted. Admiral Richard and David answered every question patiently. Other Vexian engineers were called in to provide more specific technical information. Eleanor walked around the machine repeatedly, studying it from different angles. She made notes on a digital pad that David had given her. She sketched diagrams, creating her own interpretations of how the system functioned. The other Vexians watched her work with expressions that ranged from skepticism to cautious interest. As evening approached on Colony 7 far below, Eleanor began to see the solution forming in her mind. It was not a traditional solution. It was not something that would have occurred to a Vexian engineer trained in 3,000 years of rigid precision. But it was brilliant. "I think I understand the problem," Eleanor said finally. "The issue is not with the materials or the design itself. The issue is that your system is too perfect. It is too rigid. Everything must work exactly right or nothing works at all. But quantum particles are not like that. They are unpredictable. They require a system that can adapt to their behavior." She pointed at a specific section of the drive. "This crystal alignment needs to be flexible, not fixed. Instead of locking the crystals in place, you need to create a system where they can shift slightly based on the quantum field fluctuations. You need something that can respond and adjust in real time." David looked at Admiral Richard with confusion. "But we cannot predict how the crystals will shift. There is no formula. There is no way to calculate it precisely." Eleanor smiled. "Exactly. You don't need to calculate it precisely. You need to build a system that can handle unpredictability. You need to trust that the machine will find its own balance, even if you cannot predict exactly how it will do so." Admiral Richard stepped closer, his golden skin beginning to glow more brightly. "This is human thinking. This is what Oliver told me about. You see solutions that we cannot see because you are not bound by our traditions." Eleanor continued explaining her idea. She described how human aircraft had evolved, how pilots learned to trust their instincts, how machines often worked better when they had some flexibility built into their design. She talked about how nature itself used adaptation and flexibility to survive and thrive. Over the next 2 days, Eleanor worked with the Vexian engineers to implement her solution. They modified the crystal alignment system, creating mechanisms that allowed the crystals to shift and adjust slightly based on quantum field fluctuations. They built in adaptive algorithms that were not perfectly predictable but capable of responding to real-time changes. Finally, they were ready to test the system. Admiral Richard gave the order. The quantum drive was activated. The machine hummed to life and the crystals began to glow. Eleanor watched as the quantum particles flowed through the system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the efficiency readings began to climb. They climbed higher and higher, surpassing the previous maximum capacity of the drive. The machine stabilized at 120% of its normal efficiency. The chamber erupted in celebration. Vexian engineers cheered, a sound Eleanor had never heard before. Admiral Richard turned to her, his golden skin blazing brilliantly with light. "You have done it, Eleanor Davis," he said. You have solved what my civilization could not solve for 500 years. This changes everything. Admiral Richard stood before Eleanor in the chamber, his golden skin radiating light so bright it was almost blinding. Around them, Vexian engineers continued to celebrate, their crystalline forms glowing with brilliant colors. The quantum drive hummed smoothly, operating at a level of efficiency that the Vexian Empire had never before achieved. Your solution is revolutionary, Admiral Richard said to Eleanor. It contradicts everything our engineers have been trained to believe. Yet it works perfectly. The particles flow through the system with grace and power. This technology will change our entire civilization. Eleanor felt overwhelmed by the moment. She had simply solved a problem the way she always solved problems. She had looked at the situation without the weight of 3,000 years of tradition holding her back. She had seen what was possible instead of what was forbidden. What happens now? Eleanor asked quietly. Admiral Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to address all the engineers in the chamber. His voice was deep and commanding, carrying the weight of his authority. I am making a decision today that will reshape the future of the Vexian Empire and our relationship with all species in the galaxy. For centuries we have viewed ourselves as superior. We have believed that older civilizations were naturally more advanced, more intelligent, more capable than younger species. This belief was wrong. He gestured toward Eleanor. This human woman has taught us something that we had forgotten. She has shown us that different does not mean inferior. She has shown us that a young species, freed from the burden of rigid tradition, can see solutions that older, more established civilizations cannot see. Admiral Richard activated a communication system on his wrist. His voice projected throughout the entire Vexian fleet orbiting above Colony 7. This is Admiral Richard. I am announcing a historic change in Vexian policy. Effective immediately, the human species is to be recognized as equals in the galactic community. Humanity will be granted full protection under Vexian law. Any species that threatens human safety will face the full military force of the Vexian Empire. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Within hours, news of the Vexian decision spread to every civilized world. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and insignificant suddenly began to reconsider their positions. Trade agreements were proposed. Cultural exchanges were arranged. Invitations came from dozens of planets requesting human representatives and advisors. Oliver approached Eleanor as she stood in the chamber, still processing everything that had happened. His crystal skin glowed with soft blues and greens, colors that Eleanor had learned to recognize as happiness and pride. You have changed history, Oliver said. You may not realize the magnitude of what you have accomplished, but I do. I have lived for 200 years. I have seen many remarkable things. But I have never seen anything quite like this. One person, one act of kindness, one solution to a problem that seemed unsolvable. This is what has changed everything. Eleanor felt tears forming in her eyes. She thought of her small garage on Colony 7. She thought of the simple life she had been living, never imagining that she could impact the entire galaxy. I just fixed a ship, Eleanor said quietly. I just helped someone who needed help. Yes, Oliver replied. And in doing so, you helped your entire species. You showed the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. Admiral Richard made arrangements for Eleanor to return to Colony 7. But first he wanted to show her something. He took her to the observation deck of the cruiser, where the entire galaxy spread out below them like a vast tapestry of light and color. Stars stretched across the darkness in magnificent patterns. Planets orbited their suns. Civilizations flourished on thousands of worlds. This is the galactic community, Admiral Richard said. For thousands of years, it has operated according to certain rules and hierarchies. Today we are beginning to change those rules. Because of you, Eleanor Davis, humanity now has a voice in decisions that will shape the future of trillions of lives. I don't feel prepared for this, Eleanor admitted. I'm just a mechanic. That is exactly why you are the right person for this responsibility, Admiral Richard said. You are not a politician. You are not driven by ambition or power. You are driven by a desire to solve problems and help others. These are the qualities we need more of in the galaxy. These are the qualities that will help us build a better future. Eleanor was transported back to Colony 7 in a small Vexian shuttle. When she emerged, she found the entire colony waiting for her. Word had spread quickly about what had happened. The colonists gathered around her, asking questions, wanting to hear about her experience aboard the cruiser. But Eleanor had more important things to do. She returned to her garage and began working on upgrades. Admiral Richard had given her access to Vexian technology. Her small repair shop began to transform. New equipment arrived, devices far more advanced than anything available on Colony 7. Within weeks, her garage became a center of innovation and learning. Vexian engineers came to learn from Eleanor. Young human engineers came to study Vexian technology. Together, they created new designs, new solutions, new technologies that combined human creativity with Vexian precision. The garage became a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species worked together with respect and trust. Oliver became the official liaison between humanity and the Vexian Empire. He traveled between the colony and Vexian space, carrying messages and coordinating exchanges. He often visited Eleanor's garage, watching as she trained the next generation of engineers. One day, as Eleanor worked on a new project, Oliver asked her if she regretted her decision to help him that first night when his ship crashed. Eleanor looked up from her work and smiled. "No," she said. "I have never regretted it. I simply did what seemed right at the time. I never imagined it would lead to all of this, but I'm grateful it did. We are building something beautiful here. Something that will help so many people." "You have given humanity a future," Oliver said. Eleanor shook her head. "No," she said. "I simply opened a door. Humanity will walk through it and create their own future. That is all I did. I opened a door." Years passed. Eleanor's garage became the most important research facility in human space. Scientists and engineers from across the galaxy came to study and learn. New technologies emerged from the collaboration between species. The quantum drive that Eleanor had helped design became the foundation for even more advanced faster-than-light systems. But Eleanor never forgot where she came from. She never left Colony 7. She continued to work in her garage, fixing broken things and solving problems, just as she had always done. The only difference was that now her work had ripples that extended across the entire galaxy. And every night, as she looked up at the stars, Eleanor Davis remembered a simple truth: that one act of kindness, one decision to help someone in need, could change the destiny of an entire species.